India. We don't talk about it enough here because, well, it's a bit of a tough place for crypto right now. And don't take our word for it. Wait until you hear from the world's biggest crypto exchange. So, let's recap. What's going on in the world's second most populous country? Crypto isn't banned here, but it's not endorsed either. Earlier this year, the federal government introduced a 1% tax on every single crypto transaction in the country. Guess what that did? Yeah, cryptocurrency investors fled for the hills. Trade volumes at Indian crypto exchanges fell by as much as 70% in the immediate aftermath, and the industry was already hurting before that tax came into effect. That included a 30% tax on crypto income, and crypto losses couldn't offset losses made elsewhere in people's portfolios, ultimately making the whole thing less attractive for investors there. Now, earlier this year, Coinbase suspended its services in India as a result of all of this. It actually cited, quote, informal pressure that it said came from India's central bank as well. India's largest homegrown exchange, WazirX, has been considering its options. Meanwhile, spats with investors and with Binance have actually overshadowed some already difficult times it was having. Its co-founders have just relocated from India to Dubai. So, how are crypto's biggest players looking at this whole situation, and what opportunities are potentially cropping up elsewhere as alternatives to India? Well, we've got some unique insight on this from Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange. We're talking to Gleb Kostarev. He's regional head of Asia for Binance. Gleb, thanks for sharing your time with us. Listen, let's talk about your plans for India. There are obviously very substantial regulatory hurdles there. Can you give us your take on what's going on? What are Binance's plans for India?
We think that India is a market with a huge potential, right? There's huge population. Definitely there is some space for like crypto adoption. So we are really interested in this market. But at the same time, as you mentioned, there are some issues in terms of current approach towards crypto industry, and we think that this tax per transaction that exists, it's a bit unfriendly towards crypto investors, right? And I would say that right now we are evaluating, we are checking properly what's going on there, so we keep in track of all new legislative initiatives. And if for us we will see an opportunity to enter market in some or another way, so we will definitely proceed. But at this moment we would like to understand better potential I would say potential effect of this tax per transaction on the industry. Because as I mentioned, we already see that it is affecting local crypto business, unfortunately, in a pretty bad way.
Gleb, one story recently suggested that more Indians are opting to trade on foreign exchanges as a result of this 1% tax on transactions. Can you give us any idea about user numbers there at the moment as a result of the changes that we've seen in India's crypto scene?
Yeah, I think there is such a trend that some Indian users, they switch to global exchanges. It definitely exists, but it's tough to say whether this trend will continue. And also we see a bear market right now, so it's hard to predict how sustainable this this flow will be.
And in terms of jurisdictions now, what are you guys looking at? Where are you looking at expansion in Asia?
We just announced that we secure registration in New Zealand, and we launched Binance New Zealand. Great step forward in ANZ area. So overall, if we speak about our efforts in terms of licenses and jurisdictions, I would say that Asia has a great potential, but at the same time, this region is pretty complex because regulators they have different views on how should be user protection done, what is needed to obtain license, different views on what coins can be listed and what coins shouldn't be listed. So overall, we see huge potential. For example, in Philippines, we think that after GameFi, got huge popularity there, it definitely a huge market for us. So right now, like we are in the process of obtaining, finalizing our acquisition and obtaining license there. Also, we think that South Korea has, a great potential. So we recently just signed an MOU with the Busan government, and will help them to develop, Web3 initiatives. Also in terms of markets, Turkey is pretty interesting, right? Turkey is really huge because people actually they're hedging against inflation.
I want to ask you also how seriously you've looked at M&A in the region, in particular in terms of acquiring local licenses. Is that something that you would consider looking at more strongly going forward?
Yeah, I would say that acquisitions is definitely one of the options how you can enter market. So actually, we are evaluate how we can enter market, what is needed, and do we need local partners for that? What the situation with licenses, for example, in some countries such as Philippines, they put moratorium on issuing new licenses. So overall, like evaluating all those factors after that, we can proceed with the acquisition as an option. Yeah, so it's pretty viable option for us.
All right, Gleb, thanks so much for your input there. That was Gleb Kostarev from Binance. That is it for this episode. Like and subscribe to this video for more content like it, and let us know your thoughts on what's happening in the comments down below.